Morning, Dr. B. I'm back with you again. Going to talk about reproductive isolating mechanisms. This is our third video in chapter 9 on speciation. So we've talked about different types of evolution. We've talked about adaptive radiation, talked about different mechanisms of speciation, and now we're going to talk about maintaining the identity of a species through some reproductive isolating mechanism that occurs either before a zygote can form or after one does form. The four different damselfly penises illustrate mechanical isolation. Each male has developed a penis that will fit precisely within the vagina that also has a very specific shape within the female. So, mechanical isolation involves a specific shape of the male genitalia that will fit a specific shape of the female genitalia. And if the shapes do not fit, then sperm transfer is impossible. And mechanical isolation is often very important in a phylum of animals that are called arthropods. So mechanical isolation is just one of several different ways that a zygote would typically not form if two species would or would have the potential to mate with one another. Geographic isolation is pretty solid as far as two species maintaining their identities because there is a geographic barrier that prevents them from mating, such as in the illustration, a mountain chain, or you might think of a large river like the Mississippi River in the middle of our country. What happens though if two species live in a similar geographic area? How might they maintain their identities? The three that follow give examples of that. Ecological isolation. Two species that are different from one another live in the same geographic area but in different habitats. One may live in a swamp, one may live in the mountains or in a forest of some sort. So living in different habitats may limit your opportunity to mate with a different species. Temporal isolation. Two different species live in the same geographic area, but they mate at different times or in different seasons of the year. Different times may be within the same month. Maybe one mates in the first 2 weeks of March and a second species mates the fourth week of March. So there's a difference in the time of the month. One may mate in the spring and a similar species might mate in the fall. So differences in season might occur as well. Behavioral isolation is when two similar species have different mating rituals. Birds have different songs, say sparrows or warblers or vireos, in which we may have multiple species of in our area. They occur in the same geographic area, but they have different mating behaviors, rituals, songs, and so forth. So we refer to all of these things as adaptations because they are species-specific characteristics or traits. Some may be learned, others may be genetic or inherited, but they evolve to maintain species identity and limit the production of hybrid offspring. The illustration of mechanical isolation, got another example of it, is there are two species of copepods there that are aquatic animals, and the genitalia that are at the end of the abdomen of each male are structured very differently. And you could imagine then that the genitalia of the female would be structured differently as well, so that it could take the specific shape of the male. So if the reproductive parts don't fit, then sperm transfer might be very, very difficult. Okay. Another type of isolation is gametic. If the sperm and egg won't fuse, or they don't get an opportunity to fuse, then the production of a hybrid will not happen. Okay. Well, you might think then that hybrids would be rare, and in the animal kingdom, hybrids are. The mule is an example of a hybrid animal between a donkey and a horse. A donkey and a horse are in the same genus called Equus, Equus. Uh, Hybrids in plants are much more common and are very important in our system of agriculture. So, post-zygotic isolating mechanisms often involve what happens if a hybrid forms. What happens if two different species mate and sperm and egg do fuse and a diploid zygote forms? Well, perhaps that zygote starts dividing. It may form an embryo, but the embryo dies. It doesn't develop properly. Maybe it's aborted or miscarried. Perhaps the embryo does develop into a fetus and is born, and maybe it dies early in age. Perhaps it develops into an adult and becomes sterile. Perhaps it just develops abnormally and perhaps becomes an easy meal for a predator. So, at any rate, hybrid vigor tends to be poor in the animal kingdom. So, the mule is a good example of a sterile, very useful hybrid between a donkey and a horse. Lions and tigers that are kept in zoos have been known to hybridize in between, say, the fence, and they form what is called a tigon or a liger. So it is possible for lions and tigers to produce hybrid sterile offspring as well. So it's not unheard of, but typically the hybrid vigor in the animal kingdom is not high as it is in the plant kingdom. Plants can hybridize fairly readily, especially if humans are trying to breed them intentionally for agricultural purposes. And many of our crop plants either are hybrids that are sterile, or they were formed as hybrids and they have doubled their chromosome number by polyploidy, a chromosomal mutation. And our hybrid crop plants are thus reproducing species, such as wheat, as an example. So hybrids in plants often have very strong vigor. They often are very productive, and they provide us with a lot of the food that we consume. So this is the ending slide for chapter 9 on speciation. Just a review slide showing you a couple of hybrids there between a tiger and a lion. Sterile, of course. And on the left side showing you a hybrid tree that's called the Leland or Leyland cypress that's often used in forming living fences. So it is possible to form zygotes, and there are often mechanisms to prevent that zygote from reaching adulthood, it failing to develop, failing to be born, dying early in age, or or advancing to an adult stage but being sterile. Pre-zygotic barriers are more common and involve either isolation at the geographic level, different geographic regions, or some isolation mechanism if two species or more than two species occur in the same geographic area, such as behaviors, mating times, or even the development of different shapes of the genitalia. So that kind of concludes chapter 9 on speciation. When I start back with the next video, it will be on chapter 10, which is entitled coevolution. So thank you, God bless, and see you soon.